Hello, and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week we're discussing everything about Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. Austen.
That's very odd to think. It's been a staple of our podcast since the very first episode, and we've finally run out.
We finally ran out of Austen.
Well, you know, unlike Woodhouse or something, there's not 18 zillion of them. So,
alas, we knew this day. We knew this day would come, and I think
this tragic day.
We should start off with our terrible summary. And if you're new to the pod, terrible summary is something which captures the essence of the book, but out of context is slightly funny. So.
Hey, excuse you, slightly funny. We're hilarious. Hilarious, I have you know.
10 out of 10 humour.
Saying that, I don't actually have a good terrible summary today. I'm like, we're so funny, our terrible summaries are always hilarious, we're comedians. I have nothing. I've got...
Mine isn't even very funny. It's like, area girl suffers emotional abuse and develops fawning as a mechanism to cope with it.
Yeah,
I guess this book isn't like a funny, terrible summary. I just put quiet child confused by snobbery, somehow doesn't grow up to be horrible, generally is awesome, brackets, everyone else around her is trash.
Yeah, no, I think the two I had that I've got written down here are, not a single motherfucker in this book deserves Fanny Price, and I will die on that hill. Mm-hmm. And the second is, even being rich not enough to fix some people's personality, which, look at the state of the world right now, we been new.
Yeah, like, for context, we are recording this on the 2nd of February 2025.
And that is enough context that you need.
Can't say any of us have a lot of love in our hearts for very rich people right now.
No.
Yeah, and this book does nothing to dispel that.
It does not.
An opinion.
Shall we just speed run through the main characters? I feel just as a context, because I feel I've forgotten everybody. It's been a couple of weeks since we've read this book. So Fanny Price, main protagonist, basically gets taken to Mansfield Park at the start of the novel, which is she's 10,
something like that.
Then Lady Bertram, which is Fanny's aunt. Then there's Mrs. Norris, so the other
who's
Fanny's
a bitch.
Other aunt, who's a bitch.
She's a widow without children.
Widow without children,
and thank God for that.
And her husband was the local parson. Then there's Sir Thomas Bertram, which is Lady Bertram's husband. And then there's the kids of the Bertrams, so Thomas, Edmund, Maria, Julia. And then there's Dr. Grant, who, when Mr. Norris dies, the old parson, then Dr. Grant and Mrs. Grant come in.
Which is terrible news, because this introduces their relatives, the Crawfords.
The Crawfords, who are trash. So the Henry, who is the brother of Mary Crawford, and he's a half-brother of Mrs. Grant, the wife of the new parson. And then there's Mary Crawford. And then we've got, like, friends of, I guess, Henry Crawford / Thomas.
You cannot expect me to remember all of them.
James Rushworth.
Oh, yeah.
Are you just reading through like a character list? Because some of these guys I do not remember.
I'm reading through Wikipedia. It's fine. I have not memorised this.
A lot of these guys are not relevant. I think one of them ends up with Julia.
Yeah.
But that's about it, right?
And then I think that's like the key main characters. So that's like, I feel the picture the scene.
Yeah, we've got like the central family, which is the Bertrams, which is 4 kids, mother and father, horrible aunt, and then Fanny, who is the poor cousin, who's
been rescued from her terrible life in poverty by her rich relatives.
So originally there were these 3 sisters, which is the 2 aunts and Fanny's mother married a lieutenant, and then had more kids than she could afford. I think it's like 9 kids or something, and was asking for help from her sisters who had married rich, and they were like, well, we don't like you and we think less of you for having not married rich and having too many kids than you can afford. And to be fair, I don't think she's painted in a particularly positive light as a person either.
No.
But what we can do is we'll take in your eldest daughter, which is probably kind of more of a fuck you than anything, because the eldest daughter is probably the most useful and helpful child. Like, she's probably been really parentified.
Yeah.
And that's how Fanny ends up in this household, being raised with her much richer cousins and constantly compared to them and put down and treated like an unofficial servant.
We get introduced to this delightful concept of, well, obviously, we need to do the charitable thing and raise one of these kids as our own. Except we must make sure she knows she's not our own and can't expect to be treated as well as everybody else. We can't have her thinking she's actually these other our kids' siblings, because then she'll get heirs.
God forbid.
She needs to remember her station.
Yeah.
Yes.
So instantly we're like, I hate all of you, actually.
Yeah. And to be fair, that does lessen the ick factor of, well, she isn't raised like a sibling with Edwin, who she ends up married to. Like, there is that layer of plexiglass between her and the Bertram children.
Although I've got to say, having seen the adaptation and then come back to this and have them say in, like, the very first chapter, it's really important that we raise them, like, just enough like their cousins so they don't get attached to each other romantically. But Thomas Bertram is literally, like, in the early chapters, like, okay, well, it's a really fine line, because obviously we don't want her to think she's, like, classy and rich or anything, because that would be, that would be a fate worse than death for our children. But also she needs to think herself enough of a relation that she won't fall in love with any of our children and then steal their inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like they just misjudged the level of abuse they were subjecting her to.
Well, I think it's mostly Mrs. Norris, and I think Sir Thomas doesn't twig until after he comes back from Antigua that, like, anything's rotten in the state of Mansfield. Lady Bertram's just too lazy to give a fuck. And Mrs. Norris is just getting away with...
actively abusive.
Yeah.
I tell you what, like, I think the thing that surprised me the most about this book is I feel it stands out separately to the other Austen novels.
Yes.
It's dark, honestly.
All the other Austen novels have somebody who, like, in a rom-com way, like you got Captain Wentworth in Persuasion, you got Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, etc., where you kind of have this idealistic view that the heroine will end up with this rich guy, happy marriage. And it just felt so different. It's definitely I know her work, like, critiques the time, and I feel this one more so, because it's not only taking from her own life, like her brother was adopted by the Knight's family, who basically had no kids, and so her brother was adopted and became Thomas Knight, and that's how then they lived in Alton, where her little house is, which you can go visit. Very exciting, where she wrote this book. And so it's something that does happen, but it's a critique on people, on the behaviour of people, because I find it very weird how anyone could hate Fanny. Fanny is doing nothing wrong. She's basically been emotionally, and she's not been physically abused, but definitely emotionally abused by everybody. Genuinely everybody. Then she grows up, obviously, to become... She's almost slightly naive in her trustworthiness. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel I'm quite pleased we read this last, because I think I would have had a very different take on this book if I'd read it first. If I'd only read Pride and Prejudice and then read this, I would have gone, oh no, but I want my happy ending. I want my Mr. Darcy happy ending. Whereas with this, it's just felt so real. It felt like Jane Austen going, I'm going to get out my pen of rage and write about all this stuff about the patriarchy and screw you all.
Like, in all the other books, for all the other Austen protagonists, so, for example, Emma's dad kind of sucks. Like, he's a bore to be around, but, like, they genuinely love each other. There is genuine warm love there, even though neither of them are very, like, particularly perfect people, right? For all the other Austen protagonists, I think that's also true. I don't know if you would agree. I might be forgetting someone.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely, yeah.
But this, I think, is the only Austen where she's alone. She's so alone.
Yeah, she's so alone.
And I think it's something that I found made this book quite difficult reading, actually, was that I feel like in most of the other Austens, like, there's a lot of annoying people, and there's some outright garbage as well, and that's, it's important for plot reasons and for conflict and stuff. And then there's a bunch of people who are both, like, imperfect but still, like, people that you find compelling, people that you like, people you're willing to forgive, or who learn and grow. And it's a fairly like even mix. I think you only get a couple of absolute standout bastards in each, but maybe even one in each book, if you get any at all. And everybody else is kind of like, well, they've got a mixed bag of flaws, but they're generally relatively harmless. And in this one, It's literally just Fanny and mostly Edmund sometimes.
Arguably, except I think he's so clumsy with her that I'm reluctant to give him a pass, I'll be honest.
Well,
and even the guy, Henry Crawford, who ends up falling in love with her, it starts out as a joke, like, let me ask out this girl that nobody likes, sort of like, let me have a little bit of diversion and see if I can convince this poor girl to fall in love with me. I just want to put a hole in her heart. Joke's on you. She's actually so beautiful and perfect and wonderful of a person that he ends up falling in love with her, but she sees through his shit and doesn't want to marry him, even though it would be such a good move for her.
Yeah.
But even he doesn't like her.
I think it really highlights the lack of agency. Just the lack of agency that in Pride and Prejudice, like Jane and Mr. Bingley are like perfect couple TM. They and sort of, I guess, Elizabeth and Mrs. Darcy sort of work it out, but she marries rich guy. And in this, she rejects the rich guy. And we're all going, yes, like, say no, because he's horrible. And like
in the adaptation that I watched with Billie Piper as Fanny and young Hayley Atwell as Mary Crawford, which was really fun. There were points in that where I could see, like, look, if he really does shape up his act and actually stand up for her a little bit and like try and instill some self-worth into her, I could see them working it out. And then when I went to go and do some background reading on this book, Austen said, she wrote later, that if after she had rejected him once, he had not pressed his hand and had instead, like, remained a friend to her and actually stayed true to his word that he was not going to go chasing after other people, which is exactly what he did immediately anyway. But if he hadn't done that, in time she would have accepted him. Yeah.
I think she even says it in the book, although to be fair, in the book, I think she gives it she's more forgiving of Henry Crawford than I would be, in that she's kind of saying, well, he is genuinely in love with her. Similarly to the way Edmund is genuinely in love with Miss Crawford, I think. And that's something that she says a few times, that they're like, these are all genuine, even if not originally, at least eventually, there's genuine love and affection there. The point is that these marriages wouldn't work based on principle. It's not enough for Henry Crawford to genuinely love Fanny. He has to actually act like he loves her.
And respect her as well.
Respect her. He actually has to develop principles and stick to them, which is, I think that's the other thing that, like, I think makes this a little bit more of a slog compared to the others, is that all of the other people being awful, that's one point, but they're all awful the same way. They're all deeply selfish, inconsiderate people who act on impulse, who don't think about other people or their feelings ever.
And none of them have, like, tragic backstories even.
No.
Like, sure, the Crawford's father has moved his mistress into their family home, but, like, they're both adults. It's, that sucks, but it's not like, oh, I have trauma and now I'm going to act out.
They're so in their own little bubble, which it is. It's all set in Mansfield, which is quite interesting compared to, like, a lot of the other books where they move, from place A to Bath or Brighton or wherever they're going.
And there's more people, even if they don't move around that much. There's more people in the vicinity, This is
a very small cast of characters.
Yeah, it's a very enclosed
it didn't take
world.
long for Lottie reading through to get to the part where I was like, these are not relevant people necessarily. These are just, like, throwaway characters.
Everybody's sort of plot relevant. In a slightly different way. Like, they're all selfish. All the men are trash in this book. There is not one good guy in this book. Edmund, like, he's less of a dick than the other people. But
it's a low bar.
But it's a very low bar. And I think also it's just quite an interesting discussion on marriage as well, like the three sisters and how they've ended up in very different circumstances. And I think it highlights the pressure that women had at the time to, you had to marry well. And not only that decision is not only marrying well, because I think Mary mentions, like, some of her friends in London who's married some really old guy and he's horrible. And there's quite a few mentions of actually, like, domestic abuse as well.
Yes.
Mentioned in this book, like, Mrs. Grant is, he's got to make sure everything's all right for Dr. Grant, otherwise he starts getting angry. And unlike a lot of I feel all of Austen's other novels, this one is sort of actually bringing front and centre, like, oh no, it's not like, oh, they get married and happily ever after. Stuff happens afterwards.
This one is much more, like, about showing you the perils of marrying badly rather than informing you of them.
Yeah.
So, like, Julia does marry her sort of boorish, just like boring, rich guy that she's marrying for status that she doesn't love.
Oh no, that's Maria. Julia marries the actor guy.
Sorry, Maria. Yes, yeah. Julia's the one who runs off with Mr. Yates.
Yes.
Maria does marry her very boring fiance, and I think it's mentioned later that she doesn't even enjoy the time that she's married to him.
Yeah.
No.
Even though it's everything she thought she ever wanted, and she thought she could It just sucks to be his wife and be chained to him all the time.
I tell you what, it kind of feels like a bigger piece about in Pride and Prejudice when Charlotte Lucas marries Mr. Collins, and Charlotte basically says, "I have no other choice. This is my best offer I've got. I spend time inside. He goes outside. I never have to see him. Whoop-de-doo, might have a child." That is her best offer, and I feel this goes into it. Yeah, more deeply.
Yeah, and I mean, except for Mariah, it's lack of character that ends her up in a miserable situation, or puts her into the miserable situation, because she doesn't end up there. She ends up even worse because she cheats on her husband with Henry Crawford after Fanny rejects him.
I'd like to know a fun fact that, okay, it's from Wikipedia, but I'm pretty sure this was also from my recent visit. I've been multiple times because it's like an hour and a half drive away to Jane Austen house. I bet everyone who visits me, I'm like, do you want to go and see where Jane Austen wrote books? Like, you do, don't you? It's quite interesting because it is what was an old parsonage in the grounds of when her dad died, and her mum, her sister, and herself, and I think they're like one maid, basically had nowhere to live, and they were hopping between people, and then the brother who got adopted by the rich couple gave them this parsonage, and it's a tiny house, like it's tiny, but it has a view right over the road. So like the little note says, but legend says that Jane would sit here by this window and watch everybody go past and like sort of see everyone in all their finery. But it's the fact that it's the first book. I think it's the first book that she made about equivalent of £40,000 in today's money from this book in its like printing in her lifetime. And it just says on Wikipedia, although Mansfield Park was initially ignored by reviewers, it was a great success with the public. The first printing in 1814 sold out within 6 months. And I'm like, you know what? I think that's quite telling. I don't know. It must have been so... I feel there must have been women who read this book going, oh my God, somebody sees me. Like, they see my situation.
Again, like you say, like she would sit at the window watching sort of the world. I'm like, yeah, the layer of plexiglass, babe. That there it is.
Yeah. It's interesting thinking about, I mean, this being one of the more, well, I don't want to say realistic, because I think the thing with Austen is that I definitely found this coming into this one, is that I was expecting, because Pride and Prejudice has become like the archetypical rom-com, I was expecting a rom-com. This is not a rom-com. This is a vindication arc. But that's a whole other what's it. But because I feel like there's more of that realism slipped in. Like, you know, when Fanny goes to visit her parents in Southampton, and it's awful. It's awful.
She doesn't fit in anymore, and
not only does she not fit in, but like it's genuinely a danger to her health. The household that she's in, like she's losing weight, and also points out to like first disabled Austen protagonist. It's giving me CFS quite strongly. Yeah. There was a lot of very relatable moments in there for me, but where was I going with this? Details, real world details that impinge on the kind of like the rom-com dream of Austen that you maybe get from like Pride and Prejudice adaptations. So there's things like. This is I think the only one that really mentions slavery. Well, I think it comes up in Persuasion, but like the fact that Sir Thomas Bertram's money comes from slavery is brought up. Not like really gone anywhere with, but it is brought up. And I think given that
there was an adaptation that goes really into it, and it's like controversial.
But there's like, I think the fact that Fanny brings it up, I think is quite telling, because that does suggest that like, Fanny doesn't necessarily agree with this, and because it's Fanny, Austen presumably didn't agree with it either. But, it's the only one where slavery gets brought up, really, and as the source of everybody's wealth. It's the only one where I feel like, and obviously, actual Austen scholars correct me, it felt like the only one where we both got named servants, and the servants actually having, like, opinions. Yeah. There's this really funny moment where the butler comes in to get Fanny, and for Sir Thomas. And Mrs. Norris is like, oh, Sir Thomas couldn't possibly want Fanny. He must have meant me. And the butler's kind of laughing at her because he knows that Sir Thomas asked for Fanny because Henry Crawford's waiting there to propose. And he's like, I don't think he wants to see you, love. But that's like, it's personality and opinion. And I think there's a bit where we see that like they've been obstructing a guest, or that they've been trying to get Henry Crawford to Fanny faster, or there's kind of a like, you know, you get this sense of them being like people who have opinions on what's going on in the house in a way that I don't think you see all that much. No. And then, yeah, of course, there's all of these terrible marriages and these hints of domestic abuse and all of the ways in which even marrying a dim but fairly decent guy just it doesn't cut it. There's so many failure modes. You know, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it's and I'll tell you what, this is I think the only Austen where I've listened to, I think, all of the Hot and Pride and Prejudice which I read, but the others I all listened to on audiobook. And the amount of times where I've been on my bike on the turbo trainer listening to an audiobook, and I was like doing like out loud going, don't you dare hurt Fanny, or just getting secondhand embarrassment. Like, I think the joy of her writing and the humour of her writing. And I would like to just point out one piece of humour, which I've already said to Emily over chat. So I have some extended family who come from the Isle of Wight. And when we used to go over to visit this extended family when we were little, it would be, we're going to the island. We're going to the island. And we all know it's the Isle of Wight. And it was just funny in this book that Fanny, who lives in Portsmouth and knows where the Isle of Wight is, also calls it the island. So island. So when she's asked, have you been to Ireland, as in Ireland, the country, she thinks they're talking about the Isle of Wight. The island.
I just love that bit of slang has made it all the, you know, that's just how people talk about it.
200 years later, that is how people around here. Yeah. Have you been to the island? Oh, yeah, we know exactly which one you're talking about. It's the one that you can see over the Solent over there.
Well, yeah, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they mean that?
It just made me chuckle. And the fact that, like, when so in the book, there's when Thomas Bertram's gone away to his plantation to go and find out why they're not making money or whatever it is, and he comes back from Antigua. And while he's been away, Thomas, the eldest son, and his buddies, Henry, John Yates and Rushworth, have decided to have a play. And it's just like Fanny's going, I don't want to get involved with this. I just want to go away to my room and read a book. And also the fact that like her room is in like practically the servants' quarters. It's like right on top of the attic.
And for years, Mrs. Norris wouldn't let her even have a fire.
Yeah, and she wouldn't even have a fire. But she has this room and she keeps it really well. And she loves to like go there and read. And she's like, I'm staying out of this problem. This is going to be an absolute mess. And they get Mrs. Norris gets in carpenters. They make curtains, and I think this is where like some of the servants are mentioned, like setting up this. They set up this theatre in the bedroom, Sir Bertram's own rooms.
Yep,
and then Sir Bertram returns early.
At that moment from what's implied to be a very long journey with unpredictable ends.
And he's like walking through his rooms and opened this door and basically steps onto the stage and there's candles everywhere.
He's just like, why have all my things moved around? Am I being pranked?
And Mr. Yates cannot get the hint.
Yeah.
He's like, we were doing a play. It was great. And Tom, and
everybody else on the table is making the throat cut gesture, like, no, stop.
They are literally, like, Fanny is described as like just backing into a corner, being like, I am not involved with this. Like, if there was,
she has a panic attack. She basically has a panic attack,
sinking into a wall, and Mr. Yates just does not stop digging the hole, and it's like this beautiful piece of second-hand embarrassment / humour, which I think is just so good in Austen's writing. But also you just kind of want to shout at Mr. Yates going, what did you think? You literally made a theatre in somebody else's house.
Somebody who was known to like really not like the idea of plays and their sort of low brow, low class, slightly immoral, and God forbid his daughters should ever be in one. It's sort of like, halfway to, being a sex worker, essentially.
It was just very good. What did you think about, I guess, one of the points? Fanny is a heroine. She's very different from the other Austens. Like, I think that in the Austen house, it's got obviously loads of Austens, like personal effects that they've collected. One of which is his book of sermons, which is meant to be what a woman was, like the ideal woman, and Fanny is effectively the complete opposite of that,
which is very funny to me.
In Jane's Own One, it's basically got literal handwriting next to it, just going no, 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 absolutely not. Which I was just like, this is amazing, this is brilliant. But it really shows in this book. Yeah, it really does. It's like Fanny is, she's just out of the way. She's not in anyone's face. She's just quietly getting on with it, and a lot of the book is in her head. But I really appreciated that. I think it really highlighted the selfishness of everybody else, and the fact that the class difference as well. Like Fanny is trying to be very knowing that she's been given this opportunity for like where she came from, this very poor family in Portsmouth, compared to where she is now, where she has these opportunities to marry well, to set up this sort of societal life for herself.
Although she hasn't entered society at like 18, which is unusual.
No. People do comment on it actually that she it's is she out, is she not out? What's the deal there? Which I think it's a facet of Lady Bertram being very lazy and Mrs. Norris being the one who would normally arrange those things and going, well, Fanny doesn't deserve the distinction.
And people forget her birthday and things like that. Even the man that she ends up marrying.
Yeah, which, hey, that's a good idea. Let's talk about that relationship a little bit.
Go.
Because, like, I think that's another kind of standout from an Austen perspective in that, like, okay.
He does nothing. He does very little to earn her respect or affection.
Yeah.
Just basic human decency.
The least worst option of her small social circle. And she was like, that'll do.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I have this kind of weird thing of like, I want Fanny Price to have everything she's ever wanted. And unfortunately that
but
also
can't she want something better?
Unfortunately this means the most dripless man you've ever...
Utterly swagless in every way.
I think it's really sad because I don't think he's a bad person. I think he has done a lot for her. Like it says that like he's the only person that cares about her education. And she's a really like... She's an avid reader and somebody who, when you get her to talk, she's clearly like well read and interested and curious and like willing to be wrong and to ask questions and to learn things. She's very principled and caring. And I don't think that. I think he helped. I think some of that is to do. Is because he was there to give her genuine affection and to care about her education
and to like read her books with her and
That being said, it does feel a bit like, well, who else is she gonna fall in love with? It's part of that.
It reminds me of me at 13, like casting around for a boy to have a crush on so that I didn't have to confront the fact that I probably wasn't really into boys.
But there's that kind of like, the feeling was friendship, but neither of them had ever experienced it.
Yeah,
because they're in this claustrophobic bubble of awful people.
It is also quite Austen for friendship to be the basis for marriage.
Yes, that's true.
But also like friendship out of necessity and there being literally no one else around.
Yeah, and I think I was expecting a happier ending by a modern standard, or a happier ending more in. Even the persuasion mode, I would have been... Because that's a thing I really love about Persuasion, is that even if Anne didn't marry Wentworth, she's in a materially better position at the end of the book. Because she's found all these people who genuinely love and respect her and want to spend time with her. Yeah. And, and some of them live in her neighbourhood, and some of them live in her, like, the neighbourhood that they're in Bath. Those people are available to her ongoing. She's got this much wider social group that appreciates her.
Like, her world has opened up. Yeah. In a way where, like, if Fanny doesn't marry Edmund at the end, she's still alone.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, it's sad. I tell you what, I wonder if there was a little bit of, because I don't know how you guys found the last chapter. Did you get round to reading it in the end, Eli, or is it just adaptation?
I did not. No, I'm going off of the TV tropes and the adaptation that we watched and a bit of extra reading.
So there's the last chapter is kind of a classic Austen, like, roundup, you know? Yeah. It's kind of like, I'm tying up all the loose ends.
Julia's run off with Mr. Yates, all of this.
In a very kind of distanced narrator kind of way, yeah.
Yeah.
And she says that she won't tell you exactly how long it took Edmund to notice that, like, Fanny's actually quite beautiful and, like, a genuinely lovely person who he loves and cares for. I won't tell you. It's however long you, the reader, think best. And
I quite like that, actually. Yeah. I think that's... because, you know, if it's just... He decides that he's not going to marry Mary Crawford because she's awful, and then immediately turns around and is just like, well, I'm in the marrying mood.
Yeah.
That sucks. And that's a bit how I felt watching the adaptation. Yeah. Whereas if it's like, you know, it's another couple of months and they will sort of calm down from it. And maybe he's had a bit of time to think about how it's all impacted Fanny and have a bit of empathy and then go, oh shit, I don't want her to marry anyone else. Yeah. Oh shit, I'd like to marry her.
And sort of re-establish his principles a bit, because I think that's the thing that I think really got me about him being in love with Mary Crawford.
Is that he wavered them because he was he wanted to be in love with her, because it would be exciting to be in love with her.
He just refused to see a lot of really, like, not great stuff, including the fact that she, like, insisted that she didn't give a shit about his profession, which he clearly cares about a great deal.
Yeah.
You know, he's very clearly seeing it as a vocation in a very, like,
it's a calling for him.
Spiritual. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the fact that she utterly disdains that from the beginning, and that doesn't affect him at all, is just, or like, weird. You know, that doesn't track with him really. Well, I think it's the thing of keeping, of, like, romantic affection not being the same as being somebody who's good at relationships. There's being in love, the emotional thing, and then there's the, like, active practice of loving people, and he's quite good at that in other directions.
Compare and contrast, not in a romantic way, but Mr. Bennet, who loves his family dearly, but fucks them over through just who he is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing that he, weirdly enough, has in common with Sir Thomas Bertram. And I've got a lot more time for Mr. Bennet, partially because he makes me laugh, but also because he's never shouted at one of his kids to tears and then insisted that she's a selfish, ungrateful brat.
For not marrying someone she wasn't in love with.
I've got, like, next to my... So I was thinking for one of our questions, like, who do you want to punch in the face and why?
Oh, Mr. Bertram.
And so I've got a list of 4. I've got, like, literally. So as I'm reading the book, so I was like, Mrs. Norris, dear God, this woman is a worse busybody than anyone in any other book, and she likes organising everyone else's lives, and she's just damn rude. And then then I said, Henry Crawford deserves a kick in the nuts. Then I was like, Yates having main character syndrome in someone else's house. And then I was like, all the men are trash. And I've put, oh my God, I've just got to the bit where the uncle berates Fanny for, God forbid, having feelings. He needs a punch in the face. Like, I just wanted to step into that book and go, you just step away. Leave her alone. Leave her alone.
And I'm most mad at him because he's the only one of the people that's mean to her that whose opinion Fanny genuinely, like, respects and wants the good opinion of. Like, I think she'd take it if Mrs. Norris decided to, like, give a shit about her, but she doesn't. A part of her being very clear-sighted, about other people's, like, flaws, is that I don't think she thinks Mrs. Norris is a good person. She doesn't think having Mrs. Norris's good opinion, aside from, like, you know, she'll stop being so mean to me.
It will material affect her, but
immaterially
it's whatever. Yeah,
well, it's like the Henry Crawford thing. It's like she doesn't want the good opinion of people that she doesn't think of as principled. Yeah, but Sir Thomas, she really, really cares about his opinion. And the fact that he's the one telling her that she's selfish and shitty is like really,
it's only
really
that. It's like the reason she's not saying anything is to protect Julia and Maria and like effectively Sir Thomas. She's trying to protect Sir Thomas. And the fact that what's so heartbreaking is that I think she kind of realises there's a few beats in this book. So where there was that where Sir Thomas just berates her for saying, "Oh, I don't want to marry him." In contrast to, say, Mr. Bennet, who basically asks Elizabeth's opinion, like, "Do you actually want to marry Mr. Darcy? Like, sure, you can say no. Like that's okay if you want to say no.
Yeah, to be sure, you'd have more carriages, but is this what you want?
Like, is this seriously what you want?" And sort of values their opinion, whereas Sir Thomas is so selfish. He's like, how can Henry, who is society's idea of a perfect man, have any faults? He has no faults.
Yeah.
And the second thing that I was like, I felt she was slightly betrayed was when with the necklace that Mariah gives her.
That's awful.
Because it's sort of Fanny sort of accepts this necklace, going, "Oh my god, this is a gift from her brother to his sister," and she's giving it to me. My god, that's such like a lovely thing to do as a friend. Like, she's giving me and then she's got to weigh up, like, for her cross that Fanny's brother's given her, like, which should she have, Edmund's necklace or Mariah's necklace? And then it turns out it's just all a sort of, it was Henry's idea. And
it's all a power play.
It's all a power play, and then she just realizes that Mariah, like
Mary,
she has no sort of her own. Mary. Sorry, I'm getting myself in muddle. Yeah, Mary. Sorry, Mary has like none of her own. Like, she wasn't doing it genuinely from the goodness of her own heart. She was doing it as some sort of this weird power play for Henry.
I really hate that.
And it just sort of, it was heartbreaking for her. It was heartbreaking because she's just going, "Oh, so it wasn't because you like me as a friend." It's like, oh, no, because all Mary cares about is, as society's idea of a perfect woman, TM, is getting married to somebody rich. Like, you know what? Fair play. But at the same time, it's just sort of...
Well, and in that specific instance, she's putting her brother over Fanny's feelings. She's putting the fact that I think at that point, she and Henry both believed that he's genuinely in love with Fanny and that he'd be good to her and that it's a worthwhile match. But it's still like that. Yeah, it feels... I mean, she does a lot of she says some very stupid shit.
She's not, as the youth say, being a girl's girl.
No, which I think, it's one of those things where I'm sort of like, I don't want to be like, oh, I think, make a cult of women's friendship or intuition or whatever. But that was the thing that I found really like, it's hard to stomach. Yeah.
For me, the person that I want to punch the most is Mrs. Norris, because, like... I was raised in large part by somebody who was not very kind to me or my siblings as a child, so at least there was none of the setting up people against each other quite as badly. But it does a number on you, it really does, even if that's not your whole world. And because of Mr. Bertram's absence, she is the driving force that sets the tone in the household, because again, Mrs. Bertram is just emotionally absent. Which is also, she bears a lot of culpability too.
Yeah.
And yeah, for me, she's the one who gets punched in the face, and she does get a comeuppance at the end.
Yes.
Although it's off the back of a woman being treated much worse by society for the same sin that a man gets away with scot-free.
Yeah.
Who do you think gaslight gatekeep girl boss for this book? I mean, girl boss Fanny, like, I love her.
See, we're running into the, like, girl boss affectionate versus girl boss derogatory.
Because I think girl boss derogatory is Mary Crawford, right?
And I mean, my default is girl boss derogatory, and that's absolutely Mary Crawford. She's like, she's embodying this ideal woman that Austen hated so much.
Go-getter,
and she's popular and, like... witty and good at society, and she's girl bossing it.
She plays the harp.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Which is like the instrument which like it lets you show off your body while still being modest,
That's not an aspect I'd thought of, but yeah, that's...
Yeah, no, it's like a thing. It's like, hot girls play the harp.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like any of the older generation of Bertrams could be gaslight, because there's a lot of like...
Honestly, Henry Crawford, I think, because, he says the exact same line to her, doesn't he? That he said to Mariah Crawford, like, don't you think we were made for each other or something? And while he does then genuinely fall in love with Fanny, it starts out as a pretense.
Yeah. And it's also like, the thing is, I don't think he realises that she knows that he's a cad. I don't think he credits her with enough good sense to have noticed that he's a piece of shit and to have, like, been saying no out of, like, actual principle. Like, Fanny Price has a spine of steel, actually.
Yeah.
But he thinks, he's like Mr. Collins, and he thinks, oh, she's only saying no to, like, be demure or, you know,
or because she's
reason.
very shy and she's been mistreated and she doesn't understand that I'm you know, that
not going to be like that.
Yeah. But if he had known that she already knew that he'd been kind of a shit, the fact that he keeps acting like, oh, you know, I'm a principal person and I'm gonna,
that she can see right through it.
Yeah, that would be a deliberate attempt to make her think he's a different kind of person, to question the reality of her own perception. But he doesn't believe she has any perceptions.
Yes. Like, nobody in this book really thinks that Fanny has interiority, and I'm honestly going to include Edmund in that a little bit. Like, there is an uncharitable reading where the fact that he's taken an interest in her education is just an extension of the, like, oh, well, we have to be charitable. It behooves us to take in this girl, and he's just...
Well, and as a clergyman, hopeful.
Exactly. You know, she is sort of a lost lamb, and he's going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually speak to respect of her necessarily. You could probably read it that way, but I think there is an uncharitable reading where he doesn't.
Yeah, and I certainly think there's room to read it as, like, Edmund. The thing that Edmund has in common with the rest of his family is that he doesn't believe Fanny when she says something's wrong.
Yeah.
Like, he gets better about it, I think, because he does sort of go, well, you know, listen, I'm going to put in a good word for Henry, but if you don't think you could be happy, you should absolutely refuse him. You know, I think you would be happy, but if you know, that is your decision. I think he gets some points from that for me. But there's a lot of instances earlier where
he respects her right to be wrong, but he still thinks she's wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. She's Cassandra in this. She is the one who knows exactly what's going on and, like, the real character of everybody around them, and nobody ever listens to her.
I don't think anyone actually apologises to her, do they?
No.
After Henry Crawford does exactly what she knew he was going to, and then entices the sister who has married Rich to cheat because they were flirting before, and the sister who has married Rich is miserable because she doesn't love her husband.
Well, and Mrs. Norris literally says it's Fanny's fault because if she'd said yes to Henry Crawford, he wouldn't have been able to run off.
But here's the thing, if she'd said yes to him and he'd cheated anyway, it would have been her fault for not being able to keep him.
Yeah.
There's no winning. And I thought it was such a surprise to me that not only A, an affair is brought up, but B, divorce. He gets divorced. Like, I thought that is in none of the other book. If memory serves... nobody gets divorced, or nobody's, like, talking about divorce.
And we don't have a lot of scandal involving married people either, do we? It's always unwed girls. And it's always like, oh, they're unwed. Oh, and then, like, in Lydia in Pride and Prejudice runs off and gets married. That is the scandal. And so you're kind of expecting it. But when it was, you know, Mr. Rushworth gets divorced because of this affair, I was just thinking, what? Wait. Like, this isn't a Jane Austen something that has been mentioned.
Well, some
before.
people have described this as a Bronte protagonist trapped in an Austen novel.
To be honest, I did feel like it. It read more like, well, the Brontes that we've read so far, in the sense of it's just going. Some of this whole marriage sitch is trash. Like, how about the patriarchy is awful to you?
Actually, the necessity of this institution for women causes untold harm and misery, sort of thing. And the best Fanny can do is marry someone that she genuinely loves, but who hasn't been that good to her, honestly.
It's sort of like the only person in her social circle who's sort of who's done the bare minimum of not be awful. Like, he teaches her to ride, he teaches her things to help her fit in. He does consider her feelings to a degree.
He considers them when he notices them, but that's the thing. He doesn't notice.
He doesn't notice. And even with the play, like, it's kind of he's
involved in pressuring her.
He's the only non-awful one of everyone she interacts with, But bearing in mind, I think this is also the only book where we've mapped up her 8 years of her life. She's 18, so I think Jane was 22 in Pride and Prejudice, and like Charlotte was obviously 27. So 18 is like, is it on the young side to get married? But you better get married soon. I don't know. It's like her only option. Which, okay, fun question for you guys. Like, who? I guess first part of the question is, who should she have married, if at all?
Nobody.
And secondly, if you could put her in any book, what book is that, and why is the answer Temeraire?
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Yeah. You know that Austen Temeraire crossover fic? Does it have Fanny in it?
I actually don't remember. Emma's definitely there. Emma's there and being like deeply rude to people. It's great. But yeah, no, I don't think she should have married anyone. I think there's a throwaway line where she and William talk about setting up a house together. Her beloved brother William, who's like genuinely, I think, the only person... What he wants to
do with the money of being promoted is live with Fanny.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another... Oh, sorry, this has brought me back to the gratitude thing, because this is a book that is very concerned with the hatefulness of gratitude.
Yes.
And the injustice of it, and the power dynamics that it creates.
Yes.
And I think I really hate Henry Crawford for that, actually. That he sort of not ruined, but he tainted the happiness that she gets from William having been promoted by presuming on it as a like, well now, he never goes so far as to say, well, you owe me. But you get the feeling that he's like really confused as to why this didn't work.
Yeah, and compare and contrast Darcy finding Lydia and Wickham and making them get married to save her reputation.
And not telling them.
Because he is so acutely aware that it could have that effect, and he doesn't want to put that pressure on Elizabeth. And the only way to avoid that is to keep her unaware of it.
Yeah. Which is, again, like Darcy for like goat. You know.
He's got good bones.
Yeah, he learns, which is, I mean, this is what I mean when I talk about this being a vindication novel, and one of the things I think is different from all of the other Austens. I think most of our other Austen protagonists have to learn something across the course of the book. They have to grow through something, or learn to change something, or to meet somebody where they're at in a way that's like improves them as a person, that's good for them. And Elliot, not so much, I don't think. I think that's kind of a vindication arc as well. But the main thing for Fanny is that she was right. She was right about everything. That's the most important thing about where she ends up at the end of the book, is not only is she right, but everybody else realizes that I don't think they necessarily go, oh, Fanny knew this the whole time. But they realize what she's known all along, that Mrs. Norris spoiling Maria and Julia has had... massive repercussions, and that lots of things that Fanny is right about. Anyway, I think you're right. I think Temeraire, I think she's in Portsmouth one day and accidentally, like, there's a courier egg that hatches for her, and then she's delivering the post. She's a post lady on a dragon. I don't want to send her to war, because I don't think that would be very good for her. But I think, she could be a medic. I feel like she would be an excellent medic. Yes, yeah. But I think the emphasis on how careful she needs to be about how much she does in a day, to me, says that the active war front is not a great fit. And I also think she's, while she does have the spine of steel that I think would allow her to, like, try, do her best and do quite well. I think she'd be happier I'm doing something that's very useful, but I'm not under a huge amount of pressure to be in danger or to overdo it, or, I think Fanny for courier pilot in Temeraire universe. That's my thesis statement. I also I was hoping, just because Hayley Atwell's so beautiful, I was hoping the whole time I was reading the book for a Mary Crawford redemption, so that she and Fanny could, like, swan off into the sunset and not have to marry anybody. And unfortunately, she just sucks. She just sucks. I mean, Austen, a couple of places...
The bit where she's like, I hope that the eldest son dies so that the one I want to marry has to take on the responsibilities and the money that I want him to have so that I can marry him.
Yeah.
It's just like so cold, because like the siblings do love each other, I think, or at least like the eldest son is like, he's not awful. Yeah. He's just a bit brainless.
He's just a bit of a wastrel, you know. It's not not in a harmful way as far as we see, just in a bit of a useless gambler sort of way. Mm-hmm. I think one of the lines in the epilogue is kind of talking about how like she does actually learn from this, and like she like, and there's at least one line where Austen says, well, you know, Fanny's being kind of uncharitable because Miss Crawford's still quite young and she could grow out of this. But we don't actually get any of that in the book, so it feels it's hard to really feel it, you know, because all we get is her being awful.
Like God forbid Fanny like not forgive someone in the future for atonement they haven't yet done.
Oh, I have another question, fun question, which is other Austen related, is if you could introduce any other Austen protagonist into this novel to like, not maybe to help Fanny, maybe to be the untitled goose and cause problems on purpose, which Austen protagonist do you think it would be funniest to put in this book with Fanny?
I feel like, I don't know what Emma would do. I don't know if she would just like hang out with the sisters, you know?
Emma, at the end of her book, when she's sort of grown up a bit, TM, and stops meddling in people's lives in that way, moves next door and has a holiday home next door and sort of takes Fanny under her wing and's like, you need somebody nice. You need somebody nice to look after you and to give you a hug. Either that or Mr. and Mrs. Darcy. No, Mr. and Mrs. Bingley. They, golden retriever energy, they would look after Fanny. 100%. Yeah,
I think because I think the Darcys would be for Fanny what they are for Georgiana, where they're sort of like, you know, they're by setting a really loving example, kind of giving, like instilling in her like more confidence and like, you know, to be less anxious about, you know, the possibilities of the wider world and things. I think they'd be, and obviously the Bingleys would take really good care of her as well. I feel like I can't decide whether Emma would walk in and be like, yes, Maria and Julia, these are my people, and continue the horrible, yes, here is a poor relation who must be grateful for my improving influence. Or if she'd get that kind of dog looking in a mirror, who is that other dog? I'm going to fight him energy about Mariah and Julia. At which point,
the other thing is like the way that she, like the sort of, I must improve this poor person's chances. Like, if she did that and then sort of with a bit more, like, because there is a version of that which is like, I have power and influence and I could improve something for somebody else, where it isn't. There is a version of that which is less paternalistic.
Yes.
And if she actually listened to the person that she was trying to do that for, it could genuinely be quite good.
Yeah.
But that's caveats. So.
I think is it Kathy from Northanger Abbey?
Yes,
Catherine?
yes.
I think that would be kind of fun.
She would come armed with all of her Gothic novels, and her and Fanny can chat Gothic novels in the library.
I think she also has pretty good instincts about people, even though she doesn't have the experience to necessarily like contextualize what she's picking up properly. So I think she would immediately zone in on everybody around Fanny is an asshole, and this person likes to read. This person seems cool. This person has good ideas about the romanticism of nature and stuff. I want to hang out with this person and like swap Gothic novels. And I think she'd be like, sometimes it's nice when you're as a quiet person to have like a friend who's just like very cheerfully and happily gonna like babble at you and like just go with you places and be excited to be in, like to hang out and not mind that you're quite quiet and that you know, I could see them being very good friends.
I need this fan fiction written. If any of you listening,
no, stop giving me more fanfic ideas. I've already
got if any of our listeners have a writing hobby and want to write the fanfic for us.
I already have. I have. How can I fix Mary Crawford in time for her and Fanny to hook up? I have, what if Fanny joins the Aerial Corps? And I have, weirdly enough, what if Fanny actually married the older Bertram instead of Edmund? Because he does have a big personality shift towards the end. And I think it could be really...
He grows up. He nearly dies and he grows up.
Yeah, and I think it could be really interesting to see how those two could help each other grow, you know? I don't know. I feel like there's something juicy in there. Anyway, yes, too many good fanfic ideas.
And also it kind of serves Edmund right. You lost your chance.
Yeah.
100%.
And I also like, the thing about Edmund is I don't think he ever realises that he might have done anything wrong. Whereas Tom very clearly knows that he's done something wrong. Otherwise he wouldn't have had this whole change of character doing better in future. What's it? Which is, you know, speaks to a more resilient character.
Yeah, like he's already, like, there's proof of concept that he can learn from mistakes, acknowledge and learn from mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in this book, that's a high praise.
Yeah, we can't take that for granted. It's yeah.
We can't. Guys, is it time for what we think
it
our
is.
darling dear Gothmog would rate this book out of 10? Because I think this is going to be one where it's different to my personal opinion of the book.
My gut says low because there's not backstabbing. There's not even like juicy drama. Really, it's quite slow. There's no actual cats.
And the one person that behaves most like a cat, Lady Bertram, is a dog person.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, yeah.
I don't think this is a high cat rating. Like, my personal rating, I mean, I do love all the other Austen novels. I think I love this for what it is and what it's discussing. I think I need to be in the right mindset to listen to it again because it's just like,
I'm glad to have read it, and I'm really interested in like the way that it's different from other Austens and the things that it's got to say. It's not a fun read.
It's not a fun read. It is like the Brontes in that respect. It's not a fun read. We appreciate it for its literary work in context. But I'd like to read Persuasion again, where she gets her letter from Captain Wentworth, and we're like, oh, we can dream. We can just but dream of such a man.
Let's see. I want to read you guys my favourite quote from the end of the book, which is thinking about, you know, whether I don't really want to read this book again. It's not a good time. But let other pens dwell on guilt and misery. I quit such odious subjects as soon as I can. Jane?
Jane, babe.
The whole goddamn book!
I don't know that this book has a lot of guilt in it, which is honestly one of the things that makes some of these characters could stand to be guiltier, couldn't they?
That's what's wrong with everybody, is they don't have an appropriate sense of shame.
They have no sense of shame and no sense of guilt. I think...
Or responsibility.
I was saying, out of 10, cat rating. 2?
Honestly, I could go as low as 2, yeah.
I was thinking a 2 or 1. I think it's a low on the cat rating.
It just doesn't have any of the things that for which Gothmog would want to develop the skill of reading.
It's not a shenanigan-heavy book, which is, I think, a lot of the other Austens, because of a lot of the mayhem is fairly high-spirited. Yeah, and it all comes right in the end.
Yeah.
There's nobody taking a tumble in Lyme Regis and hamming it up or anything.
There's no juicy drama of being stuck behind a hedge while your crush talks to his current crush about, like, what he thinks marriage should be or whatever, and you're just sitting there like, oh fuck, well I have to stay behind this hedge now.
I'm stuck in the hedge. Guys, before we wrap up, what else have you guys been reading, consuming, listening to, want to share with the group being our lovely listeners all over the world?
I have not been reading much at all, I'll be honest.
Eli's been at the club.
I have been at the club. I've been recently I've been recently hanging out with some friends on the coast, and also then going to a conference, which is one of the things I do. Shout out to my beloved friend Rendell, who told me today, in fact, that they started listening to this podcast. So they'll probably listen to this episode when it comes out. Yeah, no, I have been busy with many things, but they haven't been reading. I've been reading music. I've been reading and writing myself some sheet music.
That counts. That counts.
I think that counts. It's our next spin-off podcast, teaching my hamster to read music.
Music theory.
Teaching my pet tortoise to compose instrumental pieces.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, Gothmog already sings beautifully, so we've got nothing left to teach her.
That is a very good point, yeah.
I have almost finished Jurassic Park.
Oh, nice.
Guys, we need to read this on the podcast. I think genuinely, I think we could get a double episode out of that book.
Genuinely, I'm super psyched for that.
Honestly, it is quite like, I'm sort of going, oh, this is quite horrible. But also, the film does not do, literally, the old...
Is it more deranged in the book?
It's so much more. The old guy who owns the island is awful. Everybody calls him out on it. The Mathmo basically just talks about chaos theory every 20 seconds and going, this is your fault, old guy. Why do you want to build this island with dinosaurs on it? He's like, well, I just want to think of the tourists. And he's like...
That's such a shit motivation.
He's like, we've got raptors in the ceiling coming through the freaking vent. And you're thinking about the tourists?
What? It's such a shit motivation. Like, at least do it for the love of the dinosaurs.
But that's the best bit, is they've got the two paleontologists, and the lawyer's like, I thought you two were the experts. And they're like, yeah, of dead dinosaurs. These ones are alive. Like, what do you expect us to do?
I love that book also gives itself, like, the ultimate get out of jail free card for, like, the science has moved on and now we know that dinosaurs probably had feathers and all of that. But frog DNA. It was all frog DNA.
I know.
You know, these dinosaurs are inaccurate. It's the frog DNA. It's all fine. Which I think is very clever.
I like the amount of maths in this book. The amount of, like, the fact that the billionaire, like, gets his comeuppance. I was like, finally. Thank you. Like, the dinosaurs did some good. So I think we should read that.
I'm 100% down. Yes, absolutely.
It sounds like it could counterbalance this book's low cat rating.
It could have a high cat rating.
Like, lots of shenanigan, lots of violence, dead capitalists,
claws
which
and
Gospel
teeth.
gloves. Yes, yeah.
All right, let's put it in the diary.
We should. But next time, our next episode, be excited. We're going back. We're going back to the world of Temera. We're going back to book 2, A Throne of Jade. Be hyped, listening to it, 10 out of 10.
It's definitely only going to be one episode this time. We promise.
We
pinky swear it's only going to be one episode.
I'm making no promises.
But either way, if it's 1, if it's 2, if we maybe somehow stretch it to 3 episodes, they will be delightful and they will be in your podcast listening platform devices if you subscribe to us on said platform. So if you want to say hello or send us a message, you can connect to us via our socials or via our website. So please do say hello, send us a message and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs and we will see you next time. Bye!